Okay, so we're gonna start. So I'm just gonna let you know what the agenda is, and I was just saying I do have a few people on Zoom, so I'm gonna be kind of split my attention a little bit. So we're gonna start with a little bit of an introduction to the lineage that I studied with, and an introduction of me. I'll introduce myself. We'll do an overview of what yoga therapy is, and then I'll talk about the tools of yoga therapy, and then we'll have some time, hopefully, for questions at the end. So I studied with the Shivananda lineage and organization, and Swami Shivananda, it was the modern, main figure in modern times of the Saraswati lineage. He never left India, but he had many disciples who came, to the West to share his teachings. Swami Vishnu Devananda was the one who started the Shivananda organization, but there are other yoga organizations. Hi, welcome, come on in. Who also, were started by his disciples. And so I did my yoga teacher training with them, and I also did my yoga therapy training. Oh, and Bria, awesome, great, thanks, yay, meetup, okay. And just to let you know, I have a few people on Zoom, so if you're wondering why I'm looking back and forth, that's why. So he actually was a medical doctor, and he was, oh, you don't need to see that. How do I hide that?
Just minimize it. Yeah, okay.
There we go. Oh, I think I
yoga lineage, that's all we see.
Yeah, yeah, no, we're good. So yeah, he was a medical doctor. He found that he was really teaching people, helping people heal on somewhat of a superficial level as a medical doctor. So he turned towards yoga so that he could help people heal more deeply. And all of the yoga therapy that, my training was really inspired by his teachings. So I'm very firmly rooted in that organization and that lineage. So everything that I'm going to be sharing today really comes mostly from that. And that's where we're coming from. That's me. That's me with my Body Positive t-shirt. I work with an organization called the Body Positive from a few years ago when I had different hair choices. But as I said, I'm an 800-hour yoga therapist. I am a certified health and wellbeing coach, a licensed Body Positive facilitator. I've been teaching yoga since 2009. Started practicing when I was in high school in the 90s. So I've been practicing for a long time. In my certification, I developed workshops for yoga for diabetes, yoga for chronic pain, and yoga for stress management. So those are kind of my areas of specialty. And yeah, I just want to take a moment to kind of tell you a little bit about my story and why I became a yoga therapist. I have dealt with leg pain since I was in high school, and it was kind of on and off. Doctors really never knew what was going on. They would tell me to lose weight, or if I was on the thinner end of the spectrum, they would tell me that I had, what's it called? Shin splints, which it was not. And I became a public school teacher, and that's when the pain became really, really, really bad. So bad that it was all the time. So it used to be kind of exercise induced, and then it became all the time. I had already become a yoga teacher at that time, but I went back to a yoga ashram after the first year. So the summer after my first year teaching, I went to a yoga ashram in the Bahamas for a month, where I was doing a work study program, and the pain went away. And I was like, wow. And then I went back to work, and the stress came back and the pain came back. And then over the next several years, with other stressful jobs that I had, the pain came back more and more and more, and just kept getting worse. And I, became very debilitating. I developed pain in other places, became depressed, and I was able to have the opportunity to go back to the yoga ashram almost 3 years ago now, for a longer period of time of work study. The pain went away again. And I was like, I need to learn more about what this is. There is magic in what is happening here. And I really wanted to learn more about that so that I could help other people as well, because it was such a miracle for me, and that's when I decided to do the yoga therapy training. So that's a little bit about my background. Here are some examples of what we see when we Google what yoga is. Okay, so I just want to ask a question to anybody in the room or anybody on Zoom. Like, what are the messages that these images send about yoga?
Definitely need to be flexible.
That you need to be flexible. You need to be fit.
Oh, well, yeah.
You need to be strong. And I'm looking here if people want to chime in or chat or put in the chat as well. Okay, fit, flexible, strong, that you have to already be things, yeah, to practice.
That yoga is a physical practice?
That it is a physical practice, yes. And this is like, a lot of people really believe that that's the case, that yoga is just a physical practice, and that's not the case.
And you just get bliss.
It's
like a blissful exercise regime.
Okay, yeah, just you do the exercise and
Yes.
you attain bliss. Cool. So yeah, so there's a lot of misconceptions about yoga, and I think this is why, like, we're in a very image-driven society, right? I'll also add, all of these people are thin, they're all women, and they're all young. So that's also often the only people that we see. It used to be the case that they would all be white. I was pleasantly surprised to see that there were a few people of color when I, right at the top, when I Googled yoga, but that is more, I think, of a recent addition. So what yoga actually is I looked up the definition because I was kind of trying to come up with my own definition. I was like curious to know what Webster would say. And so they said it's a Hindu theistic philosophy teaching the suppression of all activity of body, mind, and will in order that the self may realize its distinction from them and attain liberation. So yes, it is a philosophy. The purpose of it is that we will realize through this practice that we are not the body, we are not the mind, we are not the will, and that, like, truly what we are is the eternal soul, and that once we realize that enlightenment, that's when we, are able to attain liberation, which is like relief from suffering. The second definition said it's a system of physical postures, breathing techniques, and sometimes meditation derived from yoga. The definition of yoga is these things derived from yoga, but often practiced independently, especially in Western cultures, to promote physical and emotional well-being. So that's definitely more what we think of in the West when we think of what yoga is. Okay, so now I'll tell you a little bit more about what yoga actually is. I've got 3 slides to give you a taste. These are the 4 paths of yoga: karma yoga, jnana yoga, bhakti yoga, and raja yoga. And raja yoga is the one that has all of what we think of as yoga. So that's where the physical practice is, breathing exercises, meditation. That's all part of raja yoga. And so those other 3 are like mysteries to most people, right? We don't talk about them, but these are 4 paths to enlightenment. Raja yoga has 8 limbs, and these are the 8 limbs of Raja yoga. So you see we have starting with the yamas and then the niyamas, and those are like ethical guidelines and personal kind of observances. Then we come into the asanas, which is the physical practice, pranayama, breathing exercises, pratyahara, control of the senses, dharana, concentration, dhyana, meditation, and samadhi, bliss. So again, this is just one of those 4, this is all that's entailed in one of those 4 paths. And then the yamas and niyamas, there's even more of those. There's 5 of each. And this is what we're really supposed to be starting with when it comes to yoga. And most people don't even know that they are a thing. So just wanted to contextualize a little bit what yoga really is. And now we're going to jump into yoga therapy. So yoga therapy is kind of drawing on all of this to help people with their prevention and management of disease. So the yoga health educator training that I did, it was an 800-hour 2-year program. I studied yoga philosophy and yoga psychology, as well as Western psychology. I studied Ayurveda, which is a sibling science of yoga. I said that I was going to kind of talk about Ayurveda a little bit today, but there's not going to be time for that, unfortunately, but I will probably plan something else to talk more about Ayurveda at some point. And then we learned about yoga for specific conditions, anatomy and physiology, and then yoga of sound and yoga of recovery. And I don't know if that's completely everything, but that's most of it. So yoga therapy teaches us that happiness comes from within, and that is not how most people pursue happiness, right? We pursue happiness by trying to get the things that we think will make us happy, like the right job, the right partner, the right house, the right whatever. We always think it's kind of out there somewhere for us to get. Yoga teaches us that happiness comes actually from within. Yoga therapy teaches us that yoga health educators and medical doctors can work together. And I'll just to point out that yoga therapy is kind of the broader thing. My program was like yoga health education training. So I'm considered technically both a yoga therapist and a yoga health educator, but they talked in terms of yoga health education because they thought that was less about fixing people and more about educating people. Whereas when people think of a therapist, they think of somebody who's going to come and kind of provide solutions. But really it's about empowering the individual. Yoga therapy teaches that health is more than just the absence of disease. So, right, it's like there's a positive state of health that we can pursue. It's not just like, oh, I don't have any illnesses, I'm healthy, because we can still be lacking in energy. We can still be just kind of like, you know, not enjoying our life very much and have whatever little kind of low grade issues that might not necessarily be a disease. So health is much more than just the absence of disease, and that yoga has healing and health promoting benefits for people of all ages, physical capabilities, and conditions, which of course might be surprising to somebody who just Googles yoga to find out what it was. Here are some more differences between yoga therapy and modern medicine. I don't want to suggest that there's something like wrong with modern medicine. Modern medicine and Western, right, medicine like certainly has its place in terms of helping us with life-saving care and surgery and, you know, treating symptoms. They do that really well, but they don't focus on prevention. And what we also notice in modern Western medicine is that specialists work separately, right, with different parts of us, and they don't necessarily communicate with each other. So, yeah, it's just kind of everything is kind of disjointed. Whereas yoga therapist is really looking at the whole person. So when a yoga therapist works with a client, they are doing a full intake and learning as much about them as possible so that they can look at the whole person. Of course, we address the link between mind and body. We address the root of the symptoms. So we're looking beyond just the physical to see like where might this have started initially. We address the physical, energetic, mental, emotional, and spiritual bodies. And I'm going to talk about that more in a moment. And again, the goal is not just the absence of health, but joyful, thriving health. I just remembered I have this thing, which is very fun and easy, but I went the wrong way. There we go. Okay, so I'll talk a little bit about the therapeutic relationship. So the yoga therapist is an active yoga practitioner, and we guide from a place of personal experience and awareness. So there's really so much to, like, we can sit here and talk about this stuff all day, but most of us are not going to really understand the benefits of yoga unless we're practicing it ourselves. And from that place, there's so much more to share with others. Yoga therapy helps clients see illness as an opportunity Not to say like, oh, I'm so grateful that I got sick, but just to kind of look at it in a different way as an opportunity for kind of deeper self-knowledge and awareness. The yoga therapist supports clients to develop self-awareness over time. And then as trust and rapport develop between the yoga therapist and the client, more will come out, and the therapist can become even more adept at helping and suggesting other recommendations just based on getting to know the client better. And then also as healing occurs, practices change to address emerging needs. So, healing occurs and then we might shift gears and focus on something else when kind of the glaring thing that was there at the beginning might kind of be less of a distraction. We can focus on deeper things. I'm gonna take a break. I've been talking for a little bit. Let's just take a second. Any questions so far? If you want to take a little stretch, take a deep breath. I actually thought about doing that before we started, and I was nervous, and so I did it. So I'm just gonna do that. People at home, take a deep breath. Maybe reach your arms up, just very simple. Maybe just shoulders a little bit. Remember, we have a body. Any thoughts, questions so far? No pressure. I'll rub my jaw a little bit. Okay. All right, I'm gonna keep going. Thank you. Okay, so what is health? We've got spiritual, mental, emotional, physical, and intellectual health here. Spiritual health. Anyone want to guess what is spiritual health? That's probably the hardest one. What does it mean to be spiritually healthy? I ask in a place where some people might not really be spiritual.
Peace of mind. I don't know.
Say again, peace of mind.
Many things that spiritual.
Yeah.
Not having an impending sense of doom.
Yeah, not having an impending sense of doom. Yes, that's really something that most of us need, I think, these days. Yeah, so from a yoga philosophy perspective, spiritual health is understanding of who we truly are. So I kind of touched on this earlier, what our true nature is. So again, not identifying as our body, not identifying as our mind, but knowing the truth, which is that we are the eternal soul. And that is what kind of goes along with that, right? We wouldn't have if we knew that once our body dies, we're still thriving, we wouldn't have an impending sense of doom, because we would know that it doesn't really matter what happens. So that that's a lofty goal for most of us, but that's kind of what the direction is that we move with yoga therapy in terms of spiritual health. Mental health is that we have a calm mind and that we're able to concentrate. That's what mental health is considered from a yoga perspective. Emotional health is having love in the heart and an absence of chronic fear, chronic anger, chronic other intense emotions, that might be thinking about all the time. And instead we focus more on love. Physical health, this is kind of a nice statement that is used. The body functioning properly under the intelligent control of the mind. Physical health. And then intellectual health is the ability to discern right from wrong. So that is, these are these 5 kind of areas. Now, these are connected to the 5 koshas, which I will talk about now, although a little bit different, right? I had mental and emotional separated into 2 on the last slide. Here, they're together in that middle Manomaya kosha, and we have another layer, which is the energetic body, the Pranamaya kosha. So when the yoga therapist meets with a client, what they're doing is they are looking at all 5 layers of being to see where there might be blockages. So during the intake process, the idea is that these layers are actually the kind of veils that cover us from being in touch with that essence, that true nature, who we really are. And so the thicker the veil is, the harder it is to see the truth. So for example, in the Anamaya Kosha, or the physical body, right? If we have like a physical disease, it takes up a lot of our time and our attention, because we're in pain or we're uncomfortable, right? And so we can't look beyond that really. We are really focused on trying to feel better physically. So then when that's the case, that sheath is very thick. And if somebody is dealing with something like that, we'll probably start with something physical so that we can start to thin that sheath a little bit. And then maybe we can, start to work on some of the others as well. But most of the time we're working on multiple layers at once. So yeah, the blockages could be that we have poor digestion, maybe we have anxiety or depression, a lack of a spiritual connection, maybe there's difficult relationships that we're dealing with in our lives. Like all of these things can be, big distractions that need work. So these are all things that we talk about and consider in the assessment. And then from here, I'll talk about the tools. So Swami Vishnu Devananda, who started the Shivananda organization, talked about the 5 points of yoga. And they are, and I like to put proper, I meant to go back in and put proper in quotes because I don't like that word. But, kind of came from this perspective in the 70s of seeing the way that Westerners were suffering and struggling, and that exercise, for example, the way that a lot of us still exercise is not ideal because it's just like moving the body, and like who knows what's happening in the mind. We might overstress ourselves, whereas with yoga it's addressing both like the external body, the limbs, whatever, the organs, but the organs are getting extra, right? Not just like the heart and the lungs, but we're getting like massages of the internal organs in the different postures, and we're also getting mental benefits as well. So that's kind of an explanation as to why he called it proper. So proper exercise, breathing, right? We've got those, the pranayama was one of the limbs of yoga as well that we looked at, those 8 limbs, proper relaxation, proper diet, and then positive thinking and meditation. And I'll go over each one of these briefly. So with the yoga, of course, yoga therapy, asanas, or postures are adapted for the individual based on their abilities. So we're never like, not forcing everybody to do the same thing. It's all based on the individual. It helps calm the mind and moves the energy through the body. It elicits the relaxation response, aids in healing, increases flexibility, strength, and circulation, and stimulates and massages internal organs. Then we have proper breathing. Proper breathing aids the body in connecting to its battery or the solar plexus, where tremendous energy is stored and then can be accessed. Pranayama exercises channel the energy for physical and mental rejuvenation. Control of the prana, or the subtle energy, leads to control of the mind, and it is believed that if you change your breath, you can really change your life. And there's actually a book that came out not too long ago called Breath by James Nestor that I highly recommend. It's fascinating. It goes in, he's like a journalist who did all this studying of like different ways, people have used breath over the years to heal different types of ailments. And he goes into kind of some of the like history, sociology, and it's just really very fascinating and inspiring, and will make you think about your breath in a very different way. I will add that breathing is one of those things that, what happened?
I can hear you.
Something happened with the projector. And I don't know what to do about that.
I mean, if they can still see it on there, you can just go for your slides without us seeing them.
So strange. Okay. I'm gonna text, I'll keep going and I'll text. You guys can still see the slides, right? Yeah, it's just a projector. I'll just text them and let them know.
No, we can't see the slide. It's all blurry.
Oh. So weird. Yeah. I know. Oh, where's my mouse? Okay.
The projector is working, but
Right.
maybe the presentation, can you see the presentation in your computer?
I can see it on my computer. Yes.
Close it and open it again.
Okay. Thank you for your patience. Hold on. Very strange. What? Yeah, it's totally Canva. Okay, starting this again. Okay. Wow, I feel very accomplished. Okay, and now I have to share this again. All right, you guys see it now in Zoom?
Yes. Yes, we do.
Yay! Okay. Proper breathing. It's one of those things that's very subtle and it's easy to drop, right? Because you don't necessarily feel the difference as much as you might by doing a yoga practice. But I keep learning. I keep having to learn over again and again and again how important it is to prioritize it. Proper relaxation. A lot of times when we think of relaxation, we think of like lying down and watching TV, right? But actually that would not be considered proper relaxation because we are not, our mind is not relaxed, right? Who knows what's happening on the TV? We could be, stressed out by what's happening or whatever. We're having a whole experience and we're still expending energy. So when we do proper relaxation in yoga, it's often Shavasana. Also Yoga Nidra is a relaxation practice that's really very deep and powerful. And this is nature's way of recharging the body. I have a lot to say about relaxation because, our nervous systems are very, very frequently triggered into the fight or flight response. Yeah. And we're not taught how to bring it back so that we're in balance. So we spend a lot of time in that heightened state, and relaxation is very important to have that balance and to recover. And staying in that fight or flight response is actually very bad for us physically as well. And then with the yogic diet, we talk about vegetarian diet. Here I put the quotes because, diet is very individual for everybody. And so I'm not saying this is what I think people should do. I'm just teaching that this is like the yogic teaching, that the belief is that food affects our body and our mind, that food can be used as medicine. We prioritize eating prana-rich foods, which are foods that are getting their energy from the sun. So plant-based foods have a lot of that prana that we can absorb. And then avoiding foods that are overstimulating, like onions, garlic, caffeine, meat, alcohol, and drugs. Onions and garlic are stimulants. They're stimulating. And
Food without onions and garlic.
I know.
There's no food without onions.
Listen.
I'm sorry.
It's true. It is very good for you. And it's interesting because Ayurveda recommends onions and garlic, but yoga does not. And if you meditate, so yoga is a philosophy, right? So when you learn yoga and you do your yoga, like when you go to an ashram, they don't use onions and garlic. And the reason is because when you meditate, if you meditate regularly, you can try this as an experiment. You might have to really commit to it, because I've noticed the difference. Meditating, you get more distracted when eating onions and garlic. If you're not eating onions and garlic, it's much easier.
I feel like there's a life worth living.
Yeah, but totally. I mean,
There's a lot of things I'll do, but I mean.
if you guys, I don't know if you guys can hear super well over here, but people here are having very hard time with the onions and garlic conversation. And I understand. And again, like none of any of this is like telling you what to do. Like yoga and Ayurveda both are ancient knowledge that is being shared and that people can use and see if it works for them, right? And decide like what's more important, right? If you're told by, if it's recommended to you by yoga therapists to meditate and you're really having a hard time, but you understand the importance of it given your specific situation, this is where that information might come in handy, because you might say, you know what, it's worth it to me right now to see if this becomes easier if I stop eating that. And then, you decide, like you see the benefits of it and you think, okay, is this benefit better than the joy of eating onions and garlic? I mean, that's like the whole thing. That's all of this, right? So we take the information, the knowledge, we keep in our back pocket, and someday maybe, we have occasion to experiment with it. But thank you for speaking.
No, it's,
Your passion. Yeah. Yes, totally. And some people are more sensitive to it than others. Yeah. Yeah. So, and then Ayurveda has like a whole system that can help guide food choices more specifically, and it's based on the season and also individuals' constitutions and imbalances. And then the last of the 5 points is positive thinking and meditation. So both of these being states that a person can achieve. We think of meditation as like a practice, but it's actually more of a state of mind. Concentration is the practice. So if you remember back to those 8 limbs, concentration came first and then meditation comes afterwards. And meditation is the state. Positive thinking is not about like, positive vibes only, denying reality type stuff. It's really about creating new neural connections in the brain. And there are strategies that you can use that are not about looking in the mirror and saying something that you don't believe is true. There's all different types of things that you can do that work and make sense. Yamas and niyamas also relate to this because, the yamas especially kind of were developed in response to our nature, right? Like the first one, non-violence. It is in our nature to be violent in various ways, right? Like whether that's to ourselves emotionally, because we have fear. Yeah. So violence is a reaction to fear. So practicing the yamas and niyamas is also going to help with positive thinking. And again, this is really about being able to uncover your true nature. Okay, let's see. We're getting close. We're not going to be too late. So again, back to the 4 paths. I'll just tell you a little bit more about the other 3. So karma yoga is self-service. This is about redirecting attention away from the self. So again, like, if somebody is struggling in that way where they're just really focused on themselves and it's causing them like a lot of difficulty and pain and whatnot, then karma yoga might be a recommendation for that person because it takes the focus away from the self and out with others. Also helps to create community. and cultivate detachment. Detachment in the sense that we are kind of dispassionate, not that we don't care, but that we don't get wrapped up in things like, whether we're doing well or poorly, it's not going to, make us like let the ego get too big or become too down on ourselves. Yeah. So karma yoga helps to cultivate that kind of steadiness. Bhakti yoga is yoga of devotion. So it helps us to channel our emotions and then also transcend our emotions. And again, it's not about repressing emotions. It's about channeling and transcending them and then accessing the divinity in our own hearts through practices like prayer, devotion, and chanting. So this one is actually considered to be the easiest path because we all have that in our hearts. If we can find the way to access it, but it takes the longest in terms of reaching enlightenment. And then Raja Yoga we talked about, and the focus really is about learning to still the waves of the mind through those practices. And Jnana Yoga is the yoga of study. So it's basically using the mind to learn and understand the truth, but it's really the hardest. If you're that type of person and you really devote yourself to it, it takes the least amount of time, but it's very rare for a person to be able to do that because how do you use the mind to go beyond itself, right? So those are the 4 paths. Any questions about these or the 5 points? Okay, so finally, I'm just going to share a few examples of how yoga therapy works in a, what is the word? In a practical way. So chronic pain, illness support, mental health, neurological conditions, and kind of general well-being. I took all of this information from yogatherapy.health. That website is up in the upper right-hand corner of the page. So this kind of gives an overview of each one. I'll let you kind of skim it yourself right now. I don't want to kind of just read it out to you. See if there's anything I want to highlight. I mean, I think this really kind of covers everything, really, these 5 categories. Yoga therapy is for everything and anyone, as long as they're kind of open to it, and it can really help in profound ways. Through my studies, I've just heard so many stories of kind of miraculous recoveries through yoga therapy. And then here are some more examples of, of just specific illness and how yoga therapy can help with specific illnesses. So for diabetes, yoga reduces fasting insulin levels, normalizing the insulin to glucose ratio, and it also increases circulation, which improves nerve damage. Various breathing techniques and meditation alleviates stress, tension, and physical pain, which can be a primary cause of high blood pressure. Then yoga is also a great intervention for people who suffer from high cholesterol and atrial fibrillation as related to heart disease. The improved strength and flexibility associated with yoga help relieve symptoms of arthritis and chronic pain. And then for all diseases and illnesses, when somebody practices yoga, the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest and digest kind of side of our nervous system, is activated. And so that's what I was talking about before, right? Like our kind of fight or flight is often activated, but yoga brings in that parasympathetic response, which lowers our blood pressure, releases endorphins, and has lots of other benefits. So finally, just share some resources, a few resources. Like I said, that yogatherapy.health website is great. There's also a lot of research studies on there if you're interested in seeing some of that. the International Association of Yoga Therapists is a good resource. And if you're interested in finding a yoga therapist for like that has a certain specialty or lives near you or whatever, they have, there's like a directory of yoga therapists.
I'm curious, what
Through
does
there.
yoga therapy look like? Like, what does it actually really look like? You know what I mean? Is it
Yeah.
doing yoga? Is it doing,
So it depends on the person.
yeah,
So like, you know,
is it?
we'll do like we do the intake session, and then there's like a plan of care that's created. So based on the person and their needs, usually that involves, you know, something from all 5 of those 5 points,
Yeah.
and also could involve something from the 4 paths that we might do together, or it might be like, oh, I send you a way to do this, right? Like I recommend that you volunteer or whatever.
Right.
So there are specific poses that might be, you know, recommended for different physical, you know, situations that people have going on, or emotional, like
Yeah.
there's, you know,
Yeah.
there's breathing exercises, meditation, relaxation practices, like chanting. That's something that I didn't really touch on more. I did say yoga of sound, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, so it's like kind of like a term, like going to like a doctor or a life coach or something, like, and having them kind of, you know, walk alongside you and like prescribe things, not necessarily medicine, but prescribe like practices or volunteering steps, something like that. Like,
Yeah.
it's not necessarily doing yoga, like physical yoga too.
Most of people are.
They are.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
It's mostly one-on-one.
So there's one-on-one and there's groups. So like many yoga therapists will lead group sessions based on like a common
Yeah.
condition. So like I did yoga for diabetes, and so then it was all people with diabetes. And so then, you know, all of the yoga practices that we did, I'm always making sure that I'm talking about like contraindications for diabetes, considering different things that people with diabetes need to think about. And then doing the practices that are going to be most beneficial for the
Yeah.
for the types of symptoms that people might have. Yeah.
So it's basically like very specific for group work
Mm-hmm.
to common illnesses or a one-on-one, like specialized.
Yeah, and like when there's group yoga therapy, you'll also have an intake with each person. So there's small groups. You do an intake so you know each person and you know how to make sure that you're keeping everybody safe. And but you know, part of the benefit of the group is that you have that community too, which is very very helpful for people who are dealing with something specific like that. And you know, people might also want to do one-on-one so that they can work on. I mean, we're all so different, right? When we have like different traumas and you know experiences and interests, and so somebody might do both.
There's a lot of layers.
A lot of layers, even more than just those 5 layers, the 5 koshas. We've got layers upon layers. Yeah. Any questions from the Zoom room? I'll stop sharing.
So where did you take the yoga therapy?
Say what?
Where did you take a course or
Where do you do it?
where?
Like me or people in general?
Yeah, you or people in general?
Yeah, I mean, I did it like,
Or, you know,
you've never heard of it. Yeah.
Yeah, you're a teacher.
Oh, you're a yoga teacher.
Yes,
Oh, okay.
exactly. So, and I know about like everything.
Yeah.
It's just, I have you know, there are different yoga therapies, but sometimes they call them different, you know, but I never heard that yoga therapy specifically.
Yeah, well, you know, there's not really so many yoga therapy places. It's more like yoga therapists offering, you know, more specific offerings in yoga studios like this or independently. There are more and more like institutions that are starting to hire yoga therapists. Like yoga therapists work in hospitals, they work in behavioral health centers, maybe eating disorder treatment centers. You know, it's becoming more well known. It is not well known yet, but that's what this yogatherapy.health website is kind of, that's the kind of point of it, is like, let's show people the research, let's get this more, you know, but more well known. But the problem is that if more people did yoga and had yoga therapy, there's less money coming in for drugs and, you know, all these other treatments. It's not a very lucrative therapy for the health industries. So it is a battle to get it, you know, more mainstream, but it's very powerful. Yes. Wow, look at the time. I'm so proud of myself. It's 3:18. Yeah, so you know, I do stuff over Zoom and I do stuff in person. I'm gonna start doing some things here. Like I said, I've got my yoga for chronic pain, yoga for diabetes, and yoga for stress management that I plan to offer again soon, those kind of group classes. I've done them virtually and not in person yet, but I think I'll probably be doing things hybrid. Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for coming. So wonderful to have everybody. Oh, I see something in the chat. Oh, thanks, Bria. I love Meetup. We got 2 Meetup. How did you guys find out about it?
I was I was talking. So they were opening the studio.
Oh, okay, Jen.
Yeah.
Oh, great. And Abraham, you? Meetup too. Okay, great. Love it. Well, yeah, so I'll just kind of send a follow-up and hopefully we can stay in touch. Let me know if you need anything and want to talk about anything else. And
Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your day. Any other questions? Anything from the Zoom?
Thank you.
Well, for the garlic and onions, love it.
I'm sorry, what was your name?
Liz.
Liz. Nice to meet you, Liz. Naomi.
Well,
Thanks, Allison. End this. Okay, I'm gonna close. Bye. Liz, did you have something you wanted to say?